Good evening, guys. So today I'm going to talk about interface design and development, PASTAS 7.1. So what is it? Okay, interface design and development is like how your interface of a web application or website should look like. It's basic principles that we're going to learn about. So there's three main topics that I'm going to cover today, which is HTML, Bootstrap, and Angular. Okay, so HTML is basically like the how you can say it, like the way we want to put in our content, and Bootstrap is like the, as you can see by this phone diagram, how it's organized, and Angular is basically the background applications of not applications the background functionality of the web application. Okay, so HTML basically right here in front of you is how the very basic of how HTML can be created. You have your HTML, which is this whole thing. Then inside it you have your head, your title, where you put your title and all that. Then your body, this is where you put your form, tables, and whatever content, images, or anything important. So here we got an example of it. This is a HTML form. As you can see here, as I told earlier, you have your HTML, you have your header. Your header is where you put your title and your access to other folders for their information, and you have your body where you put your content. Here you can see we have email, name, gender, comments, and then beside here we can see how it will look like. So this radio button is basically similar to this XLL. They are not a direct this one, they are just an example to give you how HTML form will look like. Okay. Next, this is a basic example of how HTML table we can create. You can see here we have table border, which is the border we're creating. Then you got table row, which is the first row or the rows of the table. Like for example, TD is table data or column, you can say. So row 1, cell 1, it falls under the first row, so this is row 1, cell 1. Then if you add one more, row 1, cell 3, you'll have one more right on this side. And then you have another row where you can do the same thing as the top one. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to talk about Bootstrap. Okay, so the latest version of Bootstrap is Bootstrap 4. But I'm going to focus on Bootstrap 3 because it's the predecessor of Bootstrap 4, and Bootstrap 4 basically works similar to Bootstrap 3 with minor enhancement. So Bootstrap 3 is still the major foundation for a web application we're going to talk about. So like I said earlier, Bootstrap 3 works on the grid system. As you can see here, you have your calendar, photos, galleries, how they are organized in a grid. That's how Bootstrap 3 works. Okay, Bootstrap 3 is a grid system where it works by 12. It works in a grid system of 12. As you can see here, I give you an example of 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 12 rows and 12 columns. Due to lack of space, I've only showed you 6. Okay, so this example here, it's how a grid system we can extend it or create it in Bootstrap. As you can see here, we have row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2. This is the second column of this whole row, and in this second column, this is the first row, and in this first row, this is the first column. Same way for this, is in the first row, this column, but it's the second column of this first row. It's the second row of this second column, and it's the second. Sorry, I made a typo here. It's supposed to be a 2, so that means it's the first row of the second column of the first row of the second row of the second column, which is this column, and it's the first column. Okay, so moving on, here you can see this is the second row. This is more direct. This is the first column, second column, and the second row, third column, fourth column, fifth column, and so on. So this is how it works. If you picture this whole table onto this grid system, it makes more sense. So in this grid system, you can extend the length of each column to, not extend the length, basically when you want to create a thing on Bootstrap, you're basically creating like a table of a 12 by 12 table, and you can extend and shrink each content of it. Okay, this is the sizes of how we can work on the grid system. So Bootstrap 3 mainly focus on mobile first, because everybody nowadays use mobile phones for everything. It's more famous than a laptop. For basically we can do anything we want on mobile phone, so we focus on that now. So call dash access, this is the way the prefix or the class you want to put. I'll show you all later an example. This is for mobile phones, this is for tablets, SM, small, medium, small devices. This is for desktops, this is for larger desktops. They all work by the 12 columns. Okay, moving on. Okay, as I told you all earlier, when you want to create put a content in Bootstrap, the grid system, every column works in a row. So if you're going to have 3-4 columns in one row, you have a major division class like here. This will be the first row as an example, and in that you're going to have 3 columns. So in each column, it has to follow by a div class call small sm-4. That means this content, this div is going to take 4 spaces from the 12 grid, and this will take another 4. As you can see, the total here is 12. Okay, like I said earlier, each Bootstrap, how it works is row, column, row, column, row, column, row, column. A column must be in a row, it cannot stay by itself. And when you want to put a content in just a single row, it should also be like a row and a column. So basically you're going to create a row, then you're going to, if you need a okay, let me show you a proper example. Okay, for example, here you can see the corporate banner, and in this code, you see what I did was I created a row. This whole thing is a row. Okay, then in that, this column has to take a big space, so I could put it as 8. So this whole thing is allocated just for the corporate banner. And then moving on, login and language, they are technically supposed to be in 2 separate rows of the second column, but a proper way of doing it is you have to create a row like I did here inside the column. This is the second column, this is the first row, and inside this first row there should be a column allocated size. I can highlight here, it's 1. So this whole thing is located for login. Same thing I did for language. And for footer banner, it works the same way as a corporate banner. Create one row, then inside that you create another class, a div class column, which you allocate the space of 12. Okay, moving on. This is Bootstrap form. See, Bootstrap, like I said earlier, HTML you can do forms. Bootstrap is like make a style of the form. You can have vertical form or inline form, but this is a vertical form. You can see it's vertical, name says it all, it's vertical. And inline, it's like let's say you have a navigation bar, you can put an inline form there for registering or what you need. It's just a small thing. There's 2 ways of doing it. Okay, this is navigation bar. You know how all these fancy website, they have navigation bar where you can drop products, home, products, you can have multiple products and all that. This is how we do it. As you can see here, we created a div class row, so a navigation bar will occupy a row, and then in that, to call it, we have to call nav class and then create a name called nav bar. And a navigation, it works with a unordered list. It works like an unordered. See, you can have nav justify, means it works in, it keeps in the center. You can put nav left, you go to the left, nav right, you go to the right, and then in that you put your content, home, products, form and all that. This is the example of this. Navigation bar also have navigation invert, which means converting it to black and white. Okay, now I'm going to talk about AngularJS. AngularJS is basically like a single page application. It works like the model view controller. Model being the data, view being the HTML and CSS Bootstrap, and controller being AngularJS. There are three main directives: ng-app, ng-class, ng-controller. Now, module. This is the code used to link the JavaScript to the HTML. Each page can have one module only. So as you can see here, this ng-app is the module. Okay, this whole thing is usually fit here. That means this is the HTML, and module is like a big container. It's like a big tool. Let's use an example of a toolbox. Toolbox has multiple sections in it, right? So the module is like the whole toolbox. So you only can have one toolbox in each page. And this is the HTML way of how you code it in. Your HTML length, data, ng-app, module name. And then this is the JavaScript. You call div ng-app because my app, ng-controller is my controller, and all that thing. So basically my module is the ng-app, my app. This thing is this part of it. Is this the module? Usually the name should be same, but this is just a reference example I've given you. Okay, moving next. Controller is like a object variable. Can have multiple controller in one module. This is the one that interact with the database. Okay, so coming back to the toolbox idea, like toolbox is basically the module, then you have multiple section in the toolbox. So in each section of the toolbox is a controller. So you can do specific things for specific each section of the toolbox can be used for specific things. Same way, same principle. The controller can be used for specific things. So this is how it looks like in the HTML. Div, data, ng-controller, my controller. This is another example here, ng-controller, and then you call it here, then you can tell what to do. Okay, scope. It's like an array name to access the variable. It only can be used in the JS file. Scope is the subcategory. Let's say in your toolbox you have another smaller section which is the controller. Then inside there you have some more subsections. That is what you can call a scope. It's like an array. You can store all the variables inside it, and to access each variable you just have to call $scope dot the variable name. You can see here this whole thing is in units, and to access it I call scope dot units and I assign it to a different variable. Okay, filter. Okay. In Angular, right, they have something called a filter. It's like a filter cup. You can use it to get the values you want, and we can also create custom filters with app.filter. So let me give an example. You see here on our right side this span.v.roman. Now this is a custom filter. Okay, Roman is a custom filter, and this is how we create it. See, app.filter, Roman, this is a custom filter. So custom filter is like what we want to get out of the app in a different way, in a different method that we need it. Okay, custom directive. It extends the functionality of the web app, can be used in multiple web apps. So custom directive is like this. This is how it look like in the HTML. Data ng menu. Menu is your directive, don't forget. So you data dash ng dash menu is how you write it in the HTML, and in the JS file it's just ng menu, capital M. So this is what the directive is. Okay, next, root and config. Ng root is function routes the application to different pages without reloading the whole application. It requires separate AngularJS script, which is angular-root.min.js. Sorry, this is a typo. It's route.min.js. Okay, so ng-root is okay. Let's say you have a database data from an external file or external web. Something is from an external. It's not inside your this one. So to access it, you can use a root. So you got you can root and get the values and you can use it. So this is how it's done here. var.angular.myapp.ng root, and then you app.config root provider function root provider, and this is how you get the value. This is the like I said earlier, you can put the path to a file URL name and all that. Okay, now Bootstrap has its validation. Now we talk about Angular validation. See, here there's 4 types: has warning, has error, has success. See, when it's success, it's green. When it's warning, it's brownish orange. Then when it's error, it's red. Then it's disabled. This is some sort of an example for Angular validation. This is a more in detail. Okay, so in this example, we are showing about Angular validation for email. So this is how you write it, this code. Okay, as you can see here, form name. This is usually validation is used in forms. So this is the form name. Okay, and then the input type email, name my input, ng model my input. Then you have the header, my form dot my input dot dollar valid. If it's valid, then you come true. If it's not valid, then it's false. Okay, so as you can see here, we just wrote 3 letters, which is not how an email is written, so it comes false. Then when we write a proper way of how an email should come, it becomes true. This is how a validation works. Okay, these are some examples. You can have ng touch is when the field is not oh sorry, my mistake. This is ng untouched. When the fields are not touched, that means the fields are not clicked yet. It's just like a color. You can set it to a separate color or something. Then ng touch is when the field is touched. When you click on it, it will show a different sort of color. Then you have ng valid when the content in the field are valid, like a valid username should be 6 letters, no dots and all that. Then you have invalid and all that thing, the standard stuff. Okay, now the most important part of creating a web app, I save this for the last because I find it very important. There's something called web accessibility. Okay, so web accessibility, what is it? It's basically to allow people to access the web when they have difficulties, if they are disabled or having some impairment issues or something like that. We should also make web applications and websites for people who are not to say indifferent, who are challenged. So these are the 4 principles: perceivable, operable, robust, understandable. So perceivable is basically, let's say you have a person who is having eye impairment, they can't see. So if you have a image you want to show, to explain, right, sometimes they can't see, so for that they can hear. So to make that, we should put captions, or in case the image can't load, we should put a wording. Let's say if you want to show an image of a house, and due to internet issues or a person is blind, they can't see it, or you can't load the image, and a second best option is to put the wording there, this is a house. That is perceivable. How to make it more perceived? How can we make it more easier for people to see our content? Next is operatable. The operatable is how operatable, how easy is it to use your web application? Can it be done fully by keyboard without mouse, in case a person don't have hands, so they can use special tools to type on the keyboard to access the web application? That is some way of an example of operable. So robust is how well is it to the current generation of technologies and future. We wouldn't like to use technologies or applications that are designed for 1997 category of technologies in the year 2018. We have to think about future. We don't want to create apps that are backward. I mean, it's good to create apps for backward compatibility, but sometimes it's very important to create apps that are compatible for the current generation and also future. Okay, next is understandable. It's understandable is how clear we are trying to show our message. Like, let's say you have a 70-year-old man who's wearing glasses and he wants to read web news. So he's going to make sure that we gotta make sure that the website is the lettering in the website are large enough and clear enough for the person to read without making it difficult for them to read. It gotta be easy for them to read. So website is supposed to make people not have issues to read it or difficulties, or we're trying to make it less error prone. Okay. So to follow that, we have something called the WCAG 2.0 Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are guidelines. These 4 principles fall under these guidelines. These guidelines are what we should follow when we're creating a website or web application. Usually Australian governments use this and it's very good. Okay, thank you guys. This is the end. Bye bye.